I want to ask you something before we begin. Think about how you feel when you check your bank account, not what you think. What you feel. Is it anxiety, relief, shame, a vague sense that no matter what the number says, it is never quite enough? Or perhaps the opposite, a discomfort with having too much, a compulsion to spend it down before it accumulates. Now think about the house you grew up in. How did the adults around you talk about money? Or did they talk about it at all? Was it a source of tension, of silence, of shame? Was it something that was always running out, or something that was carefully hoarded, or something that was spent freely without thought of tomorrow? Because here is what decades of psychological research have consistently found. The way you relate to money today, your spending habits, your saving patterns, your financial anxiety, your relationship with debt, your ability to earn, and your ability to keep was largely shaped before you were 10 years old. Not by financial education, not by your income, not by your choices as an adult, by watching. Psychologist Brad Klontz, who has spent his career studying the psychology of financial behavior, developed a concept he called money scripts, the unconscious beliefs about money that we absorb in childhood and carry into adulthood without ever examining them. Money scripts are not lessons you were taught. They are conclusions you drew from what you observed, what you heard, what you felt in the rooms where money was discussed or avoided or argued over. Klontz identified 4 primary money script patterns: money avoidance, the belief that money is bad, that wealthy people are corrupt, that wanting money is shameful; money worship, the belief that more money will finally solve everything, that financial security is the answer to all problems; money status, the belief that your net worth is your self-worth, that what you earn is what you are; and money vigilance, the anxious, hypervigilant relationship with money that can never quite trust that there is enough. None of these scripts arrive in adulthood fully formed. They are assembled in childhood, piece by piece, from 1,000 small observations and a handful of moments that landed with particular weight. Here is how money scripts actually form. You are 8 years old. Your parents argue about money, not once, but regularly. The arguments have a specific quality: fear underneath the anger, shame underneath the fear. You do not understand the numbers, but you understand the feeling. And the feeling is this: money is dangerous. Money is the thing that makes adults frightened. Money is the thing that cracks the surface of safety. And so you grow up with a body that tenses when financial conversations begin, a mind that avoids looking at bills, an adulthood organized in ways you cannot fully explain around not having to feel what you felt in that kitchen at 8 years old. Or this: you grow up in a home where money was never discussed, where it simply appeared and disappeared without comment, where asking about it felt somehow inappropriate, private, adult, not your concern. And so you arrive at adulthood with no relationship to money at all, no framework, no literacy, no instinct, just a blank space where financial confidence was never built. Or this: you grow up watching a parent use money as love, gifts instead of presents, spending instead of attention. And so you learn, without anyone saying a word, that money and affection are the same currency, that buying things for people is how you show you care, that receiving expensive gifts means being valued, that your own spending later will carry an emotional weight that has nothing to do with the object purchased. For people who grew up in genuine financial insecurity, the psychological legacy is particularly profound and particularly persistent. Research from Princeton economist Senthil Mullainathan and psychologist Eldar Shafir found that scarcity, the persistent experience of not having enough, does not just affect behavior, it rewires cognition. People who grew up in scarcity develop what researchers call a scarcity mindset, a cognitive orientation toward lack that continues to operate even when the material circumstances have changed, even when the bank account is full, even when the income is stable, even when the rational mind knows that the emergency is over. The brain that learned to scan for shortage keeps scanning. The nervous system that learned to treat money as a survival resource keeps treating it that way. The person who grew up poor and became successful still wakes at 3 in the morning with a financial anxiety that their current circumstances do not justify, because the brain does not update automatically. It updates through deliberate, repeated, often therapeutic work. And until it does, a person can be financially secure by every external measure, and psychologically living in the scarcity of a childhood that ended 30 years ago. Here is something that most people find uncomfortable. Your financial behavior is not just shaped by your parents' relationship with money. It is often a direct emotional response to it. If your parents were anxious about money, you are likely either anxious yourself, having absorbed the anxiety directly, or compulsively carefree with money, spending freely as an unconscious rebellion against the scarcity that defined your childhood. If your parents were irresponsible with money, you are likely either financially irresponsible yourself, having learned that this is simply what adults do, or rigidly controlling with money, saving compulsively as a response to the instability you grew up inside. Psychologist Ted Klontz calls this financial reenactment, the unconscious tendency to recreate the financial dynamics of our childhood in our adult lives, not because we want to, but because familiar feels like normal, even when normal was painful. The person who grew up watching a parent gamble away the rent money does not decide to have a troubled relationship with financial risk. They simply find, in adulthood, that financial risk feels familiar in a way that stability does not. The person who grew up in a home where money was hoarded and abundance was never enjoyed does not decide to feel guilty about spending. They simply find that spending triggers a guilt whose origin they cannot quite locate. The research on changing inherited money scripts is both hopeful and honest about the difficulty. Klontz's studies found that awareness alone, simply knowing where a money script came from, produces measurable changes in financial behavior. The act of naming the script, tracing it to its origin, and recognizing that it was a conclusion drawn by a child in specific circumstances rather than a universal truth about money or about yourself begins to loosen its hold. But awareness is the beginning, not the end, because these scripts are not stored in the thinking brain. They are stored in the body, in the nervous system, in the automatic responses that fire before conscious thought arrives. The person who freezes when opening a financial statement is not making a rational choice. Their nervous system is responding to something that happened decades before that statement existed. What actually helps, research shows, is a combination of three things. First, naming the script and its origin. Where did I learn this? Whose voice is this? What was happening in my family when I drew this conclusion? Second, deliberately, repeatedly, doing the thing the script says is dangerous. Opening the statement, checking the account, talking about money with a partner instead of avoiding the conversation. Third, finding new evidence. Real, repeated, lived evidence that the feared outcome does not arrive, that looking at the numbers does not cause the catastrophe, that having savings does not make you your parents, that spending does not mean you are irresponsible. The script rewrites slowly, with evidence, with repetition, with the patient understanding that you are not undoing a bad habit. You are undoing a childhood conclusion that made perfect sense at the time.